What is good, people? Welcome back to another video on 8 Count. Today's video is first of 2 uploads. In this one, we are going to be checking out UFC 280. I'm going to be giving you my thoughts and reaction to what went down this past weekend. And then in the next video, I'm going to be giving you my picks for the upcoming UFC Fight Night, Cater versus Allen. A great main event, so be sure to go and check that video out later on. But we should probably just get things started. As always, leave a comment down below, let me know your thoughts on what went down this past weekend. Leave a like on the video if you enjoy, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. Let's get straight into it, guys. And we'll start off with the main event. Charles Oliveira is defeated in the second round via arm triangle by Islam Makhachev. What an impressive performance overall from Islam. For me, going in, I did pick Charles. I always pick against him, and I just felt like every time I pick against him, I'm wrong. So let's just go the opposite way. I felt that Charles had, a really good chance in this fight, considering out of the two, I'd say his stand-up is the more, I guess you could say, complete. He's got more techniques he throws. He's more well-rounded, I'd say, in the stand-up area, whereas Islam is, mostly reliant on his boxing, which I wouldn't say is the greatest. However, I thought that Charles was pretty reckless in this fight. Some of the techniques he was throwing, like jump kicks and stuff like that. And it did kind of leave him open. I was impressed by Islam's, kind of will to get the fight to the ground. And I was kind of interested in how Charles was kind of happy for the fight to go to the ground. I think we saw the first takedown which happened was kind of Charles pulling guard. And from there, we kind of saw a sequence of events which made the fight more intriguing to me. I wasn't sure how the fight was going to play out in terms of when it hit the ground. I thought it could potentially come a bit of a stalemate. But we saw Charles able to actually get a really nice sweep and get back up to his feet early on in the fight. However, I think that was in the center of the octagon, whereas I think later on we saw Islam, get some takedowns along the fence line. And we saw he was able to really control Charles and kind of stop him from really doing anything. And he was able to maintain ground position. He wasn't really passing or threatening with anything, but he was able to hold Charles in the ground, which was interesting. So we saw the two sort of different outcomes reliant upon where the fight would hit the ground. I think in the second round, we saw Charles come back out and, he's quite aggressive on the feet. He's coming forward. And, I think Islam did a great job of, holding his cool and believing in himself on the feet. And I think it was Charles going in for some sort of maybe jumping teep kick or something like that. And Islam hit him with a big right hand, which dropped Charles, and the fight went to the ground. And, we saw Islam, the speed in which he kind of locked up the arm triangle. And as soon as he could, get out of the half guard and get into the side control, Charles had no choice but to tap. I think it was super impressive on Islam's part. And, I think in Charles's case, he did kind of make some errors which led to him losing. It wasn't a fact of Islam is just better and that's why he won. I feel like, if Charles was to have a different sort of mentality and strategy, maybe this fight could be different if it played out in the future. However, Islam does get the win, and this is kind of set up this huge sort of super fight against Alexander Volkanovski, who is currently, if we look at the pound for pound rankings, he is currently number 1, which, kind of says a lot because, since Usman lost against Leon, I think it has become the sort of, everyone believes now that Volkanovski is the pound for pound number 1, the pound for pound king. And it makes for an interesting fight, Volkanovski coming up in weight to take on Islam Makhachev, in a fight which is supposedly going to go down in Volk's back garden in Australia. I think it's an intriguing fight. However, I do think if it was Volk versus Charles, the matchup is probably a bit more favourable for Volk. I think this one is definitely a lot harder. I think in terms of on the feet, I think Volk is, I don't know if he's got that sort of power to really have an effect on Islam. I think it's going to be the speed. I think he's a lot quicker, and it's the footwork which could give Islam problems. However, I think if Islam is able to get Volk, against that fence line and get his takedowns off, it's going to be a really tough night. I don't think Volk's going to get out of that fight unscathed, and neither do I think Islam is. I think it's going to actually be a really good fight. I know not a lot of people are kind of not as interested in it, which kind of makes sense because I feel like the Oliveira matchup would have made a bit more of a statement. I think those styles kind of gel a bit better. But nevertheless, it's a huge fight for Islam. And for his first title defense, it doesn't get too much bigger than that. For Charles Oliveira, this is kind of a huge defeat, I'd say, in the manner it went down. I think if he'd lost the decision, and it would have been a close fight, or even, kind of one where he just got controlled by Islam, it wouldn't be much of a statement. But the fact that he got submitted, I think that's kind of huge, He said after the fight that he wants to get back in there straight away. And, I think there's an opponent who I have in mind, which makes a hell of a lot of sense. I'm going to get into that a bit later on. We'll move on to the co-main event, though. Aljamain Sterling defeats TJ Dillashaw by second round TKO. This fight is so disappointing, man, because I think on paper it's actually a really good fight, especially after seeing how it kind of played out in those 2 rounds, I guess you could say. The fact that Aljamain was able to get the fight to the ground so easily was kind of interesting, right? Because that was before TJ's shoulder even popped out. Yes, he was compromised, but it made it interesting for sure. And I would love to see this matchup in the future. However, it kind of comes to the debate of why did this fight happen? TJ Dillashaw hiding that sort of shoulder injury, and these, I guess, the ethics of the sport is kind of in question in terms of the medical background checks. And for me, I would, I kind of understand both ways around it. People saying he should have never gone into the fight, and that completely makes sense. But I think you've got to look at it from TJ Dillashaw's standpoint, which is, that shoulder injury is kind of bad, and he's 37 years old. By the time it's going to take for him to rehab it and come back, is he going to have to fight again to get into the title shot position? I can understand why he went into the fight. He could have, pulled out of the fight and potentially put it later down the line, but there's no guarantees that shoulder injury was going to kind of heal in the time frame which it would have taken. And he probably would have got jumped in line. I understand why he took the fight, and it's super disappointing the way it played out. For Aljamain Sterling, it's unfair for him as well, because he gets this win in TJ Dillashaw, which is one of the biggest names you can kind of have on your record in the bantamweight division, and it's tarnished just like the Piotr Jan victories. I'm kind of upset for him as well, because it's not fair. He didn't get to prove that he is the top dog, and I think he deserved that sort of moment of, he was either going to be proven that he's not or he is. And if he would have got that win, it would have been absolutely huge. So I'm really gutted the way the fight played out. For Aljamain next, I think there's only one fight that makes sense, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of top sort of killers in that bantamweight division. But I think if Henry Cejudo is serious about coming back, I think that fight makes all the sense in the world. I think on the feet, Aljamain can give him problems because of how unorthodox he is with certain techniques that he throws, especially the kicking game. I think the wrestling is going to be interesting because, Aljamain's style is slightly different to Cejudo's. Obviously, Cejudo, an Olympic gold medalist, I do expect him to kind of get the fight to the ground. But what happens when it gets there? And I think that's the question I want answered. And I'd definitely like to see that fight next. I think for Sterling, it does give him another chance to kind of give him that number one. He is the best in the bantamweight division. A win over Cejudo, is absolutely huge. I think it's only Benavidez and Mighty Mouse who have that at this stage. So I'd love to see that fight play out. For TJ Dillashaw, it's an absolute mess, man, because no matter what you think about him as a person or, after the EPO scandal, in terms of what he is as a fighter, he is brilliant, man. He's a winner, one of the most competitive guys in the sport, potentially. And in terms of his skill set, he is unique. He's got a very good ground game, which is super underrated. His wrestling is really good. But on the feet, he's special. The way he sets up traps, and it's a shame that this has happened because I can see him being out for a while. And at the age of 37, is he past his sell-by date now? And I do worry for him in that sort of point. But we'll have to wait and see. Move on to Petr Yan taking on Sean O'Malley. This one is a super controversial split decision. Obviously, Sean O'Malley got the hand raised, but it's left people questioning, I guess, MMA in general online, which I'm kind of shocked about, because the way I saw the fight, I think it was a lot closer than it's made out to be online. I think watching it the first time, I thought round one is super close, and it's kind of about a preference. I think some of the strikes landed by Sean O'Malley were, definitely the cleaner of the two. Petr Yan didn't really do all too much in that first round. He did land a takedown or two, but he didn't really do too much with the ground time, and he didn't really control Sean O'Malley or go for any submission attempts or land even some really nice strikes from these sort of ground positions. For me, I can see a way where you can give Sean O'Malley the first round. And if you give Sean O'Malley the first round, it's not exactly hard to give him the third. However, I do think Petr Yan took the first round. From my viewing perspective, I felt like out of the two, he got the most done, despite not necessarily throwing as much. Round two was a clear Petr Yan round, kind of dominated that round. But round three, O'Malley came out swinging, landed a big knee, some really good shots. Yes, Yan got some of the takedowns as well. But I did give that round to Sean O'Malley, so I would have had it 29-28 Petr Yan. A lot of people saying it's 30-27, and I can understand, right? Because I think you can make a case for each guy in each of the rounds, and I think it comes down to, that scoring criteria, because I think as a whole, when I saw the decision, I wasn't surprised that Sean O'Malley won, but I felt dirty, it didn't sit right with me. I felt like Petr Yan deserved more, because I felt like he won the fight, and O'Malley achieved so much in that fight that he would have earned that sort of the respect he was due, to be rated properly inside the bantamweight division. But the way it played out just leaves you with a bit of a dirty taste in your mouth. I saw Dan Hardy talking about it earlier on in one of his videos on Full Reptile. And I think he was speaking about how he could see the score and go either way as well. And I think that just probably puts down questions for the scoring criteria. We've had it before, and we'll have it again for sure, because it's just messed up, because I don't think a 10-point must system is going to work in MMA. Not everything is equal. A takedown isn't equal to a high kick which lands on the chin. There's so many different variables that each thing isn't level, and it's hard to score it overall. Taking it from boxing, it works out more. It's more clear, and it's more clear when it's a robbery, in my opinion. I know a lot of people think this fight is a robbery, but for me it isn't. I just think I don't know, man. It's tough to really talk about it because it's weird. Because it just doesn't sit right, let's be honest. But for Sean O'Malley, this is a huge win. Petr Yan, it's a huge step back. What's next for him? I mean, we look at the rankings coming into the fight at a bantamweight. Sean O'Malley was ranked 11th, where Petr Yan was ranked number 1. I think the fight which I like the most for Petr Yan next it is Merab Dvalishvili. I think Merab is dying for that sort of number 1 sort of contender matchup. Is he going to fight Aljamain? I'm not too sure, but if Cejudo gets that win, I think that would be an interesting fight, Merab versus Cejudo. And for Sean O'Malley coming into the fight, I told you, I believe he's underrated. I believe he was a fighter who was overrated, got a lot of hype, and then because people maybe disliked him or stuff like that, they kind of started hating on him, and he became so underrated in my books. I think he's a dangerous fighter. He's a real sort of gunslinger, the way he throws that left hand, and he's so tricky because he's so good from either stance, in my opinion. I think the lateral footwork in this fight gave Petr Yan problems. I think as you saw the fight go on, you saw O'Malley become more of a stationary target, and it suited Yan more and more. But for me, I love the fact, I really like the idea of Marlon Chito Vera versus Sean O'Malley 2 in a 5-round. Main event's hard, right? Because I think Sean O'Malley's got that sort of pull, which gives him that star power, which makes him maybe too big for a UFC fight night. When we make Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera a 5-round co-main event on a pay-per-view card, I'd love to see it. I think they've got unfinished business, and I think in terms of a fight, their styles match up really well. You know, the first fight, you know, it's a clean victory for Chito Vera, in my opinion. You know, he got the job done really successfully with the leg kicks, and you know, despite what Sean O'Malley thinks or what other people think, it's a clear win. But you know, I think the fight could play out a lot differently. I think Vera's super dangerous, and you know, if he catches, you know, O'Malley the amount of times that Petr Yan did, I think, you know, O'Malley could have his lights turned off. And kind of the same for Chito, man. It's a dangerous fight for both of the guys, and I just really like it. I think it would give us a definitive sort of answer of who potentially is the next number one contender. I think you've got other guys in the division who are deserving of a shot, like Murad Dvalishvili. That's why I kind of like the Petr Yan fight. But I think you can kind of throw those 4 names around and kind of do it again. You know, who's to say we don't do Petr Yan versus Sugar Sean O'Malley 2 in a 5-round co-main event on the UFC fight card as well? Because I think whatever happens, we have to see O'Malley over the distance of 5 rounds. I think in this fight, his, I guess you say, gas tank did hold up, but it was in a 3-round fight, and it's completely different to a 5-round fight. You know, it's more of a sprint, and I'd like to see how he'd handle himself over 5 rounds. In terms of the grappling in this fight, I was super impressed with both guys. Knew that, you know, Petr Yan was underrated in terms of his wrestling ability. And coming in, I was speaking about the quintet event where I saw O'Malley pulling off like jumping guillotines and stuff like that. I knew his ground game was really good, and I just love this bantamweight division. I think if you look in terms of combat sports, any combat sport, somewhere around that 130-pound-ish mark, you know, that's where you find the most elite talent, in my opinion. We'll move on now. Beneil Dariush defeats Mateusz Gamrot. A decision, unanimous decision. Super impressive performance, man. I got this one wrong. I went with Gamrot. I thought his pace and his sort of pressure would be too much. I think in round 1, I did give the round to Gamrot. It was a close round, but I think Gamrot kind of got the job done. He got a couple takedowns. Yes, we saw some amazing jiu-jitsu on the part of Beneil Dariush. You know, some amazing scrambles from both men. And for me, I felt like Gamrot won the round because I felt like he was getting the better of the exchanges once both men were breaking away from the clinch. And, you know, I think that was kind of the deciding factor for me. But the next 2 rounds, Dariush undoubtedly took the fight to Gamrot. I think in round 2, it was completely different because we saw Dariush put Gamrot on the back foot, and he just surprised me in terms of his striking ability. You know, in the past, I think he's looked decent. Other times, I think he's kind of looked a bit meh. I think in the past as well, we've kind of seen him slow down a little bit, I'd say. But this fight was kind of like a throwback. He looked really good on the front foot. He kind of took it to Gamrot. And the 3rd round was flipped again. You know, Gamrot was the one coming forward, but we saw Dariush kind of countering and, you know, setting up some traps on Gamrot, which made it super difficult. I think we saw Gamrot going in with some sort of jumping knee, I believe. And Dariush landed a big right hand and dropped him to kind of put a statement on that 3rd round and give him the decision. For me, the most surprising thing about this fight is the fact that Beneil Dariush is 33. Going into the fight, I was like, man, he's got to be getting up there now. You know, 37, 38. I've been watching MMA for so long now, since around 2006, 2007. And he's been in MMA so long as well. I don't remember the first time I saw Dariush, but maybe around like 2011, 12-ish, right? And he just doesn't seem to... Well, he seems to age, but not age, because, you know, looking at him, he looks grey and kind of looks a bit old, and respectfully. But to be only 33, he's kind of in his prime right now, I guess you could make the statement for. And 100% deserves kind of a number 1 contender matchup at minimum. You look at the sort of streak he's on, it's amazing. However, I think the question is, he still hasn't got one of those top guys. You know, and you look at where he is in the lightweight division. He's sitting at number 6. He had to fight backwards to Gamrot at 9. Kind of leaves him in a position where, does he move above the likes of Michael Chandler or Justin Gaethje? I'm not too sure. He's going to have to fight one of the big dogs in this division in probably a fight night main event to kind of earn his title shot. Obviously, now we're going to see Islam Makhachev taking on Volkanovski, which kind of holds up the division a little bit longer. I think there's one fight which makes sense. I kind of alluded to it earlier on. Charles Oliveira, coming off a defeat, wants to get back in there again. I think Beneil Dariush is the perfect matchup. I think on the feet, Charles is the more dangerous of the two. But from what I saw in this fight, I definitely think Beneil can kind of handle himself. I think in the wrestling department, I'd actually give the edge to Dariush. And in the grappling, it'd be super interesting because Charles is so dangerous, but so is Beneil. You know, Beneil is a very high-level black belt in his own right, and I love the matchup. You know, if Charles Oliveira can get through Beneil Dariush, who's been on an absolute sort of havoc run, you know, where he's being beaten a lot of high-level guys, you know, who's to say he doesn't deserve the next title shot? Because you look at the people below him, Dustin Poirier, Gaethje, Chandler, they've all kind of been held up a little bit. I expect one of them to probably take on Fiziev, which would be a super interesting fight. But is that worthy of a title shot? I think Beneil Dariush versus Charles Oliveira should decide the winner. Should decide who will get the winner of Volkanovski versus Makhachev which will be a really, you know, kind of interesting bout because I like either sort of matchup again. So yeah, that's what I'd love to see. I think Beneil Dariush has more than earned himself a title shot and, at least that number one contender fight. And, you know, just because he hasn't got that sort of star quality, it makes it hard for the UFC to kind of throw him in there, I believe. No matter what you think about it as a sport, you gotta have something about you. You gotta have that markability for them to kind of give you that push, so that if you do become champion, they can market you and sell pay-per-views. Caitlin Chukagian against Manon Fiorot. I can't say her name. I always struggle. But Manon with a really good performance, in my opinion. I wasn't able to watch this one as closely. I was watching this one with my father, and I kind of just got a little bit distracted as the fight was going on. But from what I was saying, I just felt like Manon was the one beating her to the exchange. Going into the fight, I did pick Caitlin. I said that, you know, when you look at her sort of record, she's only losing to the very elite of the division. You know, you looked at the Jessica Andrade loss, which was a disappointing one for her. But then it's the, you know, Shevchenko, and you know, I do believe that she is one of the better fighters in this division, and she's basically beaten anyone who isn't considered an elite fighter in the division. Manon has just gone in there and kind of taken that away from her, and I believe, you know, potentially could get the next matchup against Valentina. If not, I think they'll probably give her maybe one more fight. But ultimately, what a tear she's gone on. I think she's 10-0 now, which, you know, it's kind of crazy. In terms of a matchup against Valentina, I'm not too sure about it just yet, but we'll have to wait and see. The fight I'm going to finish this video on is Belal Muhammad versus Sean Brady. It was a super intriguing matchup going into it. I kind of said going in, I felt that I picked Belal Muhammad, because I'm trying to get Beneil Dariush and Belal Muhammad mixed up there. I picked Belal Muhammad because I believe the sort of improvements he's shown in his game over the previous years have been so impressive. And I think with Sean Brady, we hadn't really seen anybody take him on who was of a standard you could really, you know, kind of match him up against with the other elite of the division. For me, I felt that Sean Brady was maybe a little bit overhyped coming into this fight. And I was just super impressed with Belal Muhammad, fuck's sake. But Belal Muhammad, man, I mean, what a guy. People hate on him online. I'm not even sure if it's a joke or whatnot, but I doubt he cares, man, because this guy's been putting in that work and it's truly paying off. His striking is much improved than, you know, since the early years in his career. But now he's becoming kind of dangerous because he's got that ability to shut down other wrestlers. He can do a great bit of wrestling himself. And the thing which makes him most dangerous, he's kind of got that Kobe Covington sort of factor of he can push the pace and keep it up. And, you know, he's kind of mounting these guys at the moment. And for Sean Brady, it was a tough fight. I thought he was doing a great job in terms of some of the counter shots he was landing. But the pace of Belal Muhammad just kept ramping up. Belal landed a big right hand and ended up finishing Sean Brady, giving him his first loss and, you know, taking it by KO. I don't know what else is to say about Belal Muhammad, man. He is a guy who, if you haven't been keeping an eye out on him recently, you know, I think the fight where it kind of stood out to me that he was going to be a problem was the Douglas Lima fight. Is it Douglas or Diego? It's one of the Lima brothers, anyway. And that was a super impressive fight, you know. Taking out a guy like Sean Brady at number 8 is super impressive because a lot of people didn't want to fight him. You know, he's kind of that boogie. He kind of had that Khamzat Chimaev boogeyman factor. For Belal now, this sets up a big fight because he cannot go backwards now. He must go forward. Whether it's a Gilbert Burns or Kobe Covington, the fight has to happen. I heard Dana talking about Khamzat versus Kobe, so that one's probably off the table. But a Gilbert Burns fight makes sense. If he can get the W there, he lines himself up in a position where he's either 1 or 2 going for the bout. You know, I guess you could argue the winner of Kobe versus Khamzat Chimaev potentially be in that position. Depending on what happens with Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, the division's kind of a bit of a mess at the moment, but I'm sure it's going to work itself out. And Belal Muhammad, at the end of it, could be getting his hands on a title shot, and it'd be very much deserved. Super impressed with the improvements he's been making, and I can't kind of wait to see what's next for him because now he's working with Habib as well. I think it makes him super intriguing because his takedown defense was really good already. But now it's going to be even better, in my opinion. You know, working with those sort of guys out in Dagestan, it's going to make him a problem, in my opinion. Let me know some of your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below, guys. Let me know if I'm wrong on the Sean O'Malley fight. I do think Pierre Yan won, but it could go either way. I'm not as bold as Robbery as everyone else, I guess you could say. But anyway, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It is greatly appreciated on my end. Be sure to check out my video going up a little bit later on. I'm going to be talking UFC Fight Night, Cater versus Allen, a really intriguing main event. Be sure to come and check that one out with me. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you later. Peace out.